We start with, hey, welcome to Spin Out, winner Dave, and we kind
I'm
of,
winner.
your winner.
All right, we're here to demystify venture
Minimize FOMO.
for VCs through the lens of LPs and GPs.
So we're switching gears today to focus on how LPs assess GPs and how you can differentiate mainly operationally. So taking a step back, our framework is threefold. There's investment diligence, operational diligence, and there's legal diligence. Dave, do you want to kind of go a layer deeper into what specifically we're going to talk about on the operational due diligence side?
Operational due diligence might be a nebulous term and it means a lot of different things to folks. But what we're really trying to do in operational due diligence, if you could put yourself in the shoes of the LP, they get limited opportunity to assess and learn about you. They want to build a long-term relationship. And so they need to try to ask some questions, learn how you conduct your business to get to that conviction. And so I like to think of operational due diligence in kind of three bigger parts, right? So the first is like the essence of what your back office does. It's the administration, the regulation, the compliance, right? So it's the bare bones of what makes your business operate and how you do it as an investment manager. Then you also have the alignment between the GPs and the LPs. This is about making sure your incentives are in line. So conflicts of interest, the waterfall mechanics, all of those different pieces of the agreement between LPs and GPs. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then lastly, because you're fundraising all the time, market shifts, terms change, new technology or new investment ideas will kind of push market terms in one direction or the other. So you always want to come back and assess what's market, make sure that your policies and procedures, what you're kind of coming to market with as a manager, matches with what other LPs are experiencing with the managers they invest in away from you. So you always want to reassess what's market. So there's kind of like three big parts.
Thanks, Dave, but my track record is a 10x, so why should I care about operations? Why don't I just invest in the next greatest deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're in that position, fundraising should be a little bit easier probably than the most. We all know that the investment due diligence, the alignment between the principal of the LP and the principal of the GP, that comes first. But after that, once you start diving into the relationship building, the operational due diligence pieces, LPs care about a couple of things, and they kind of want to de-risk it in a particular order, right? So I want to make sure your business practices protect me, right? So I want to know that if you're going to be investing in founders, that our reputations are going to be protected. And that if you're going to be managing my confidential information, my email addresses, my social or business identification numbers, how much money we've invested, that you're not going to dox me. I'd be very mad if that were to happen. And then lastly, we'd all be very, very mad if you inadvertently fall victim to cybercrime or wire fraud and send some of our precious resources out into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Like that would be very, very catastrophic and would hurt your chances as a manager to continue to raise money. So I think operational due diligence is about going through those policies and procedures to protect yourself and your LPs, even if you're a 10X fund.
Got it. Okay, so this is fundamentally a risk management exercise. Even if I'm investing into good deals, I need to manage those deals properly. I need to make sure cash is going to the right place. Yeah. There's other parts of the business that don't involve just investing into companies where, I need to make sure information is protected, data is protected. Okay, so that's minimum viable back office. What are other parts that are important to talk about when it comes to ODD?
Yeah, I think every manager needs to sit down and map out what their strategy is for operational due diligence. And there's probably like a couple of levels. One is bare bones. What is the basic data room that you're going to get together that has the collection of documents, term sheets for your legal, your track record, documentation and artifacts from your process, like all of that stuff that eliminates time and back and forth between you and the LP. So you definitely want to talk through and make sure you've got an initial data room set up correctly. Then you want to think through with your advisors, your legal, your accounting, your CFO, your partner GPs, what are the business practices and incentives that you're going to see to align with the LPs. Right? So you want to go through that process and make sure that you're aligned. We'll talk through how to prevent things like affiliate conflicts of interest and how to make sure that LPs who are interested in co-investments get treated fairly. But it's all of those kind of complex and nuanced pieces that LPs are interested in how you are going to handle it. You want to make sure you think through and have a good plan. And so we'll talk through those. And then lastly, there is just the basic securities and good process and procedures to make sure you don't fall victim to a cyber hack or an accident that releases information, or potentially wire fraud, which is on the rise. Winner, I have a question for you. In your experience, both investing in and mentoring a bunch of funds, how do you see this process of diligence from an LP? And let's pick a larger, more sophisticated LP. How do you see it kind of playing out? What are the different timelines and stages as people go from an introduction with an LP to maybe a signed set of subscription documents?
Yeah, I think the process generally, right, as an LP will mainly be trying to get to know the person, like who are you? Then it's what do you do, right? What's your strategy? And then what have you done, right? So have you invested on the back of the strategy before, right? I think that's probably the first kind of go, no go. If that's an exercise of confidence building and the LP is getting excited where they like you, they like the strategy, they like what you've done ties to what you're going to do, all of that could lead to more digging in, right? But I think, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So when they start to dig in, right, like what do your materials look like? How, like, this is a fundamental reflection of your strength of business operations. That's where ODD kind of starts. It's almost like a first impression of how do you engage with me? How do you share materials? What do those materials look like? What is the underlying data of those materials? So again, that's a first impression for an ODD, but fundamentally the LP is still underwriting you and your track record. But again, if things go well, that could be for a high net worth individual as an LP, that could be as soon as 1 meeting or 2 meetings. For an institution, that could be 5 or 10 meetings and, 6 or 18 months of diligence. But eventually for larger checks, there will be a transition from just focusing on the investment diligence to the operational diligence piece. And that's when they're going to start digging into these things we're going to go into over the next few weeks.
When you were doing operational due diligence at larger investors, what was kind of like the conversation after you started getting into operational due diligence? What do GPs not know is being talked about after their Zoom calls?
Yeah, so my prior background was investing into established funds as well as emerging funds. And a lot of those emerging funds were kind of traditional spin-outs from established funds. So I think the lexicon of operational due diligence was well known. There are also like amazing teams around these spin-outs, right? Lawyers that this wasn't their first rodeo. They had kind of done fund formation for dozens or hundreds of other funds before. So there's a lot of sophistication in the market. I think when I was, investing at prior institutional roles, over the last few years, working in the emerging manager space, I think there's kind of just less knowledge around what are LPs actually looking at. Maybe that's because some of the teams around those emerging managers are less experienced. The market's bigger. Some of those backgrounds are, different. Like you're coming from an operational background to a VC or a different background to a VC. Right. And so there's less knowledge of like how the fundraising process works. Again, going from investment diligence to operational due diligence to legal diligence, to kind of close it out. Yeah. I mean, when we would, engage, we would, already have made a decision that we want to move forward. That's like a fundamental piece where you're usually not engaging in operational due diligence until there's a decision to spend resources at the LP firm on operational due diligence. So that's a really good sign.
That's a key insight.
Yeah, that's a really good sign. If, they're spending time on operational due diligence, then things are going well, right? Like you've already made the first cut. You've already kind of graduated from AAA ball. Like, congratulations. Again, what we're trying to do here, I think, is help you understand, okay, well, what now, right? And especially if you're a first-time fund, you're setting up these processes and procedures for the first time. So are you setting them up to a place where, if LPs are looking at it, they're going to be comfortable with, giving you lots of cash, right? Like that's fundamentally how I think about it. And if they don't get that comfort level, right, they might right size their check, or they could even pass, right? And kind of wait and say like, there just seems like there's a lot of things missing here. There's a lot of yellow flags. So maybe we'll, push our commitment out to the last close and see how it comes together over the next, 6 or 12 months. So I do think it's an advantage to kind of get these things right early on. It doesn't necessarily lead to a no. Like if you don't have some of these processes and procedures set up, there's a lot of LPs out there, especially a lot of institutional LPs who invest in emerging managers that can hold your hand a little bit and help you move through this process and set up kind of the right pieces to your business. So don't think of it as like a yes, no. If you have this, great. If you don't have this, it's an absolute no. Think of it as like, what should you have, right? And our part here is like, we're trying to help you build better businesses, right? So that there's less risk, so that there's greater outcomes. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And that's what LPs care about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot here. We're going to kind of break this down episode by episode. Again, one episode, we're going to focus on team and alignment. Another will focus on kind of, your investment strategy and your investment process. Very important for LPs to understand. We're going to talk about fund formation, like the terms you're picking in this current market that can kind of be tied to alignment of interest, but it's going to be more focused on, the legal terms. Compliance and governance. Again, very important, right? That you're complying with kind of the necessary pieces of regulatory, and that you're governing kind of, the fund well in your underlying business as well. And then, we're going to, dive into administration as well. So there's going to be different pieces here where we're breaking down kind of the pieces of the business that LPs are kind of dissecting. Again, our fundamental belief is that LPs are still going to pick great investors, right? That's still what they're looking for. They're looking for cash on cash returns. But there are these other pieces of the business that are being more heavily assessed in this market where there is a flight to quality. So we think these are very important things to talk about. There are examples of this, where I was just talking to someone this week that raised a $35 million fund and got a $5 million endowment check, and they had to go through this process during the first fund. There are a number of examples like that. It can happen at fund one, can happen at later funds, but we're going to try to give you some of the tools to at least understand how LPs are going to be talking about your situation post-meeting, how they're going to be digging into your data room, how they're going to be looking at your materials, how they're going to be looking at your business, really to assess like, where are you in that spectrum of, risk curve. I think that's a really important topic to discuss in this market where fundraising is getting tougher. There's a flight to quality, and we're excited to introduce our first episode focused on team and alignment of interest next week. Dave, we'll see you next week.
Great winner. I'll see you next week.